Hello and welcome back to the Voucher Program's webinar on HATMA Implementation Notice. My name is Jennifer Laverell. During this segment, we're going to cover three attachments: Attachment G, Attachment H, and Attachment I. So starting with Attachment G, which addresses the new PBV initial contract term and extension term, HATMA amended the Housing Act to extend from 15 to 20 years the maximum allowable term of a PBV HAP contract. And the regulation will be updated to make this change once we get to proposed rulemaking on it. As you can see on the slide, new contracts as of April 18th, 2017 may have a term of up to 20 years. Prior to the enactment of HATMA, the contract could have a maximum initial term of 15 years, and the same was true for a contract extension. It was limited to a 15-year maximum. So a PHA and an owner could enter into an initial contract for up to 15 years and agree to an extension for up to 15 years for a maximum combined term of up to 30 years. Now with the new HATMA language, the initial contract may have a term of 20 years and the extension may have a term of 20 years for a maximum combined term of up to 40 years. This is a fairly straightforward change, but it's worth walking through examples to show how the change applies to contracts that were entered into prior to the enactment of HATMA. And we'll walk through some examples in a moment. First, though, some of the comments that we received on the January 18th, 2017 Federal Register notice pointed out the existing regulation having nothing to do with HATMA. It was confusing regarding the number of times a contract may be extended. And we had to look at the language thanks to those comments, and we agreed that it could be more clear. So we decided to address that issue in the PIH implementation notice. To be clear, there is no limit on the number of times a contract may be extended. For any contract extension beyond 20 years from the end of the initial term, so the initial term ends and another 20 years of contract have elapsed, there are some conditions that a PHA has to meet before the contract can be further extended. These conditions are in the existing regulation. They were not changed by HATMA. I'll just say what they are. One of the conditions is that the PHA must determine that the extension is appropriate to continue to provide affordable housing for low-income families or to expand housing opportunities. And then secondly, the PHA's determination must be made no earlier than 24 months before the expiration of the PBV HAP contract. And of course, as I've said, the term may not exceed 20 years. So in addition to the examples that related to the longer contract term enacted as part of HATMA, I've included a few examples that address the confusion about extensions. So let's get started with some examples. This first example is very simple. At any time on or after April 18th, 2017, an owner and a PHA may enter into an initial contract with a term of up to 20 years and an extension of up to 20 years. So in this example, the initial term begins on January 1st, 2018 and runs for 20 years. The extension begins on January 1st, 2038 and runs for 20 years. And then if the PHA and owner want to enter into a subsequent extension, the PHA will have to make the required determination, the 2 points that I just mentioned, no earlier than December 31st, 2056, which is 24 months before the expiration of the PBV HAP contract. So fairly straightforward example. Now in this example, we're looking at a contract that was entered into prior to April 18th, 2017, the effective date of the HATMA provision. You can see that one table shows the pre-HATMA environment and the other shows the post-HATMA environment. So first, let's look at the initial contract, which is the middle row of both tables. The initial contract was entered into on January 1st, 2016, and it was still in effect on April 18th, 2017. Since the contract had not yet ended when the HATMA provision became effective, the initial contract may be extended from 15 to 20 years. You can see in the post-HATMA table that the new end date of the initial contract becomes December 31st, 2035, where it was December 31st, 2030 in the pre-HATMA table. So we have an additional 5 years. Now let's look at the extension, which is the bottom row in both tables. In the pre-HATMA environment, the extension was for 15 years with the start date of January 1st, 2031 and an end date of December 31st, 2045. In the post-HATMA example, the extension begins on January 1st, 2036, the day after the initial contract term now ends, and ends on December 31st, 2055. As with the previous example, if the PHA and owner want to extend yet again, then the PHA will have to make the required determination no earlier than December 31st, 2053, which is 24 months before the expiration of the contract. All right, let's look at another example. This slide is similar to the previous slide, but in this case, the initial 10-year contract had ended before the HATMA provision took effect. This means that the initial contract term may not be extended to 20 years. A contract term may be extended only for a contract that had not ended prior to the effective date of the HATMA provision. The extension term may be lengthened to 20 years because the extension had not reached its end date when the HATMA provision became effective. With an initial contract of 10 years and an extension with a term that is now 20 years, the total contract term becomes 30 years. That's the maximum term that the PHA may provide in this scenario. A subsequent extension is permitted, but only if the PHA makes the required determination no earlier than 24 months of the new end date. In the post-HATMA example, the new end date is December 31st, 2034, so the required determination could be made no earlier than December 31st, 2032. This example also illustrates an important point about extensions beyond the first extension, which is this. The factor that determines whether the PHA must make the required determination is the amount of time that has elapsed after the end of the initial contract. If 20 years has elapsed since the end of the initial contract, then a subsequent extension may occur only if the required determination is made within 24 months of the end date of the PBV HAP contract. To further illustrate this point, consider the post-HATMA example again, but this time imagine that the contract terms are switched. In other words, imagine an initial term of 20 years and an extension of 10 for a total term of 30 years. In this scenario, the PHA and owner may not enter into a new 20-year contract when this extension reaches its end date because 20 years has not elapsed since the end of the initial contract. Only 10 years has elapsed. In this case, the PHA and owner would have the option to increase the extension term to 20 years so that the new end date would become December 31st, 2044. Only after that 20 years had elapsed would a subsequent extension be permitted, and then only if the required determination were made on or after December 31st, 2042. In thinking about whether a PHA determination is required, the question to ask is this: how much time has elapsed since the end of the initial contract? If the answer is less than 20 years, then the contract term may be increased up to 20 years. If the answer is 20 years, then a PHA determination is required within 24 months of any subsequent extension. Going forward, a PHA determination must occur every 20 years in order for a PHA and owner to continue extending a contract. Okay, now we're going to look at a final example. In this example, the PHA enters into a HAP for the maximum initial term and wishes to extend the contract, but for not more than 10 years at a time. So let's walk through the table. The initial term of 20 years has a start date of January 1st, 2018 and an end date of December 31st, 2037. That's the maximum term of 20 years. The PHA and the owner enter into an initial extension of only 10 years, which ends on December 31st, 2047. They then enter into a second extension for 10 years, and this second extension has an end date of December 31st, 2057. The PHA and the owner may enter into a third extension, but before doing so, the PHA has to make a determination no earlier than December 31st, 2055 that the extension is appropriate following the regulation as I described earlier. So in this example, we see a 20-year initial contract, 2 10-year extensions, so totaling 20 years, and the required determination is needed in order for the third extension to take place. All right, now we're going to move along to Attachment H, which discusses priority of PBV HAP contracts. HATMA established a new section of the 1937 Act, which states that in the event appropriated funds are insufficient to fund all vouchers administered by a PHA, the PHA may not terminate a PBV HAP contract if cost-saving measures that do not require the termination of a HAP contract are available. Only after a PHA has taken all cost-saving measures will it have the discretion to terminate a PBV HAP contract. And because a PHA has discretion at this point, it must identify in its administrative plan whether it will first terminate housing choice voucher or project-based voucher assistance and the factors it considered in making the determination. On this slide, we list some examples of the types of cost-saving measures that are available to PHAs, and this material comes from PIH Notice 2011-28, Cost-Saving Measures in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. I encourage you to review the notice in its entirety. A PHA may have additional ideas about cost-saving measures it would take prior to considering whether to terminate PBV HAP contracts. If so, those measures must be spelled out in the PHA's administrative plan. Attachment I, biennial inspections. So HATMA amended the Housing Act to clarify that biennial inspections of PBV-assisted units may be conducted using a sample of units. The biennial inspection of voucher units was authorized in the FY14 Appropriations Act, as was the use of alternative inspection methods. With respect to alternative inspection methods, the Act specifically mentions inspections under the tax credit and home programs. The tax credit program employs sampling, which means, of course, that not every unit is inspected. HATMA merely amended a different section of the Act to clarify that a biennial inspection of each assisted unit is not required. In other words, the use of sampling is okay. The use of biennial inspections in the project-based voucher program, including inspections that employ sampling, was already implemented in regulation. HUD will not need to modify the PBV regulation as a result of this change. Along the same lines, notice PIH 2016-05, which is known as the Streamlining Regulation, provided implementation guidance on the use of sampling for biennial inspections, and that notice will remain unchanged. Thank you for your attention.